The scream came first. "Ma'am, according to our records, you have outstanding warrants for shoplifting and disorderly conduct," the desk sergeant said, his fingers clicking across the keyboard. "We're going to need you to come with us." My hands trembled as I pulled out my driver's license, social security card, and every piece of identification I could find in my purse. "Officer, please look at these photos carefully. That woman in your system is not me. I've never been arrested in my life." "My name is Margaret Baker. I'm 55 years old, and until this morning, I thought the biggest problem in my life was deciding whether to plant roses or tulips in my front garden this spring." I'd come to the DMV to renew my license, something I'd done dozens of times before, when the clerk's face went pale and she started making phone calls. 20 minutes later, 2 police officers were escorting me out in handcuffs while other customers stared and whispered. But Crystal had always been trouble. She'd struggled with addiction in her 20s, had a few run-ins with the law that David rarely talked about, and seemed to drift from job to job without ever finding her footing. David, bless his heart, had always been the type to see the best in people, even when that optimism cost him dearly. As my younger brother and the eternal optimist of our family, David Baker had spent most of his marriage making excuses for Crystal's behavior and covering for her mistakes. The officer finally looked up from comparing my real identification with the booking photos on his screen. His expression shifted from suspicion to confusion, then to something approaching concern. "Mrs. Baker, these photos? They're definitely not you. But someone has been using your full name and giving your address when they get arrested." My stomach dropped as the full implications hit me. "What address did they give?" 1247 Maple Street. That was my address. My home where I'd lived for 12 years, where I'd built my garden and hosted family dinners every Sunday. Someone hadn't just stolen my identity randomly. They knew exactly who I was and where I lived. "I need to call my friend," I said, my voice barely steady. "And my family." The first call I made was to Rebecca Thompson, my closest friend and neighbor for the past 8 years. Rebecca had been my anchor through my divorce, my job changes, and every crisis that had come my way. At 62, she had the practical wisdom of someone who'd raised 4 kids and buried 1 husband, and she never sugarcoated the truth when I needed to hear it. "Margaret, slow down." Rebecca's voice was calm but alert as I tried to explain the situation through my panic. "You're at the police station? Are you under arrest?" "Not anymore, but Rebecca, someone has been using my name. 3 arrests in 6 months, and I never knew about it until now." "They used my real address." The question I'd been avoiding asking myself hung in the air between us. The answer was obvious, but saying it out loud would change everything in my family. It would force me to confront David with an accusation that could destroy his marriage and our relationship. "I think I know," I whispered into the phone. "But I hope I'm wrong." My second call was to David. My brother's voice was cheerful when he answered, probably expecting our usual midweek check-in about weekend plans or family gossip. David Baker had always been the steady one in our family, the one who fixed things and kept everyone together after our parents passed away 5 years ago. "Margaret, perfect timing. Crystal and I were just talking about having you over for dinner this weekend. She wants to try that new recipe she saw on—" "David, I need to ask you something important, and I need you to be completely honest with me." I took a deep breath, watching the police officers move around the station, still processing my surreal morning. "Has Crystal been in any trouble lately? Any trouble with the law?" The silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. When David finally spoke, his voice had lost all its usual warmth. Why are you asking me that, Margaret? Another long pause. Then, in a voice so quiet I could barely hear him, "Oh God, Margaret, I can explain. It's complicated." Crystal has been going through a rough patch, and she panicked when she got pulled over a few months ago. She didn't want another arrest on her record because of her job, and she gave your name instead. I made her promise it would never happen again. I know. I've been trying to get her to come forward and straighten this out, but she's scared. She's been going to meetings again, trying to get clean, and she's terrified that if she confesses, she'll lose everything. David, I don't care how scared she is. I was scared too when police officers walked me out of the DMV in front of dozens of people. I was scared when they told me I had outstanding warrants. I'm still scared because I don't know what other legal problems are waiting for me out there. What do you need me to do? He asked finally. I need both of you to meet me at the police station right now. Crystal needs to confess to what she's done and straighten out these records immediately. And David? I paused, looking around the police station that had become the backdrop for the worst day of my adult life. We're going to have a very long conversation about family loyalty and what it actually means. After I hung up, I sat in the plastic chair and tried to process everything that had just happened. In one morning, my quiet, predictable life had been turned upside down, and the person responsible was someone I'd welcomed into my family, someone I'd cooked Christmas dinner for and sent birthday cards to for 15 years. The officer approached me again, holding a stack of papers. "Mrs. Baker, we've started the process to flag these cases for identity theft, but you're going to need the person who actually committed these crimes to come forward. Without that, clearing your record is going to be much more complicated." I nodded, watching the clock on the wall tick toward noon. David and Crystal would be here soon, and then we'd have to face the full scope of what she'd done to my life. But what I discovered next? The trap finally sprang shut. 20 minutes later, I watched through the glass doors as David's car pulled into the police station parking lot. Crystal sat hunched in the passenger seat, her face buried in her hands. Even from this distance, I could see her shoulders shaking. David walked around to her side of the car and opened the door, speaking quietly to her for several minutes before she finally emerged. Crystal finally looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed and watery. "I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know how sorry I am." David placed a protective hand on her shoulder. "She's been having panic attacks all morning thinking about this." Something about his immediate defense of her sparked my anger again. "David, please. Just for once, can we focus on the fact that what she did was wrong instead of how hard this is for her?" "You're right," he said quietly. "You're absolutely right." Crystal was the first to be called back to give her statement. As she disappeared behind the glass partition with the officer, David and I sat in uncomfortable silence for several minutes. "How long have you known?" I asked finally. David rubbed his face with both hands. "I suspected something after the first arrest, but she swore it was a mistake, that she'd panicked and given the wrong name. I wanted to believe her. Then, when it happened again..." He trailed off. "You knew, and you didn't tell me. For months, you knew that my name was attached to criminal charges, and you said nothing. I kept thinking she'd fix it herself. She promised me so many times that she was going to come clean and straighten everything out. I didn't want to hurt you if she was going to make it right." I stared at him. This man I'd known since we were teenagers, who had been my steady, dependable brother-in-law for over a decade. "David, you chose her over me. You chose protecting her from consequences over protecting me from having my life destroyed." Through the glass partition, I could see Crystal talking animatedly to the officer, gesturing with her hands. The officer was taking notes, occasionally asking her questions that made her pause and think. "She's sick," David said quietly. "The addiction, it changes how she thinks. She doesn't make decisions the way other people do." David was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to love her without protecting her. I've been doing it for so long. I don't remember how to be married to her without making excuses for her." It was the most honest thing he'd said in years. "Maybe that's part of the problem," I said gently. "Maybe protecting her from consequences isn't actually helping her." We sat in silence again, watching Crystal through the glass. She had stopped talking and was now listening intently to something the officer was explaining, nodding frequently. "What happens to us now?" David asked. "To our family?" I had been asking myself the same question since I'd been handcuffed that morning. Crystal and David were the only family I had left since my parents died 3 years ago. The holidays, the birthdays, the Sunday dinners, all of it had been built around the 4 of us. "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm angry, David. I'm angrier than I've ever been at anyone in my life. But I also don't want to lose you. You won't lose me. But things can't go back to the way they were. I can't pretend this didn't happen, and I can't keep enabling this pattern where Crystal does whatever she wants and everyone else just adjusts around her." Before David could respond, Crystal emerged from the back room with the officer. She looked exhausted, but somehow lighter, as if telling the truth had physically lifted weight from her shoulders. The officer gestured for all 3 of us to join him. "Mrs. Baker, the good news is that Crystal has provided a full confession for all 3 incidents. She's agreed to make formal statements for each case, which should clear your record completely." Relief flooded through me so suddenly that I had to sit down. "However," the officer continued, "there's something else we've discovered during our investigation that complicates matters significantly." My stomach dropped. "What kind of complication?" Crystal looked at David with an expression I couldn't quite read. Fear, maybe, but also something else. Guilt. "There weren't just 3 arrests," she said quietly. "There were more." The silence that followed Crystal's admission stretched so long, I could hear the fluorescent lights humming overhead. David's face had gone completely white. "How many more?" I asked, my voice barely steady. Crystal looked down at her hands. 7. Over the past 2 years. 7? The word came out as a croak. "Crystal, that means there are 10 arrests on my record." 10. I know, I'm sorry." "Stop." I held up my hand. "Just stop saying you're sorry. I need to understand what this means for me." The officer consulted his notes. "We're going to need to go through each case individually. Some may have resulted in warrants, fines that have gone unpaid, court dates that were missed. This is going to take time to untangle." David finally found his voice. "Crystal, how could you not tell us there were more? We've been sitting here thinking this was 3 incidents." "It wasn't always conscious. Sometimes I'd panic and just..." 10 times, Crystal." "What were the other arrests for?" David asked quietly. Crystal glanced at the officer, who nodded encouragingly. "Shoplifting, mostly. 2 were for possession. 1 was public intoxication. 1 was disturbing the peace." "Disturbing the peace how?" I pressed. "I got into a fight with someone outside a bar." David buried his face in his hands. "Jesus, Crystal." "The person I fought with, did they get hurt?" I asked. "Not really. Just some scratches." "Not really?" My voice was getting higher. What does that mean? She had some scratches on her face, okay? But she started it. The officer cleared his throat. Mrs. Baker, I want you to know that we're going to work to clear all of this from your record. Crystal's cooperation is going to make that process much smoother. I nodded, but I felt numb. 10 arrests. 2 years of this happening while I had no idea. I have to ask, I said to Crystal. Were there times when you almost got caught? When someone questioned whether you were really me? You used my driver's license? I made a copy, changed the photo. David's head snapped up. You forged her ID? I had to make it believable. But it didn't. It didn't because we caught it. Because I happened to get pulled over on the same day you gave my name to someone else. If that hadn't happened, how long would you have kept doing this? She didn't answer. How long, Crystal? I don't know, she whispered. David stood up abruptly and walked to the window, his back to all of us. I could see his shoulders shaking. David? I called softly. I need a minute. His voice was thick. Take your time, the officer said kindly. This is a lot to process for everyone. What? Margaret, please? Did you think about me at all? Even once? Did you think about what would happen to me when this caught up with us? I thought I could handle it. I thought I could get clean and then figure out how to fix everything before you found out. David turned around, his eyes red. That's what you always think, Crystal. You always think you can fix it later, clean up the mess after you've made it. But some things can't be fixed. Don't say that, Crystal said quickly. Please don't say that. I'm not talking about us, David said quietly. I'm talking about the way you think, the way you assume there's always going to be someone there to help you clean up, someone whose life you can borrow when yours gets too complicated. The officer looked uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding in front of him. I'm going to give you folks a few minutes to talk. I'll be right outside if you need anything. After he left, the three of us sat in heavy silence. I need to know something, I said finally. And I need the truth. Are there any other ways you've used my identity? Credit cards, loans, anything else? Crystal's hesitation was answer enough. What else? David demanded. I opened a store credit card once. Just once. I paid it off. Recently? Last month. I felt dizzy. What store? It doesn't matter. I paid... What store, Crystal? Macy's. But I paid the full balance, I swear. It was only $800, and I paid every penny back. That's not the point, I said. The point is that there's a credit account in my name that I didn't open. Do you understand how that affects my credit report? But you weren't hurt by it. Stop telling me I wasn't hurt! I shouted, and both David and Crystal jumped. Stop deciding for me what does and doesn't hurt me. You stole my identity, Crystal. You committed fraud using my name. You got into fights and shoplifted and did drugs, and the whole time, as far as the system knew, it was me doing those things. I never did drugs while I was arrested. That's not the point either. I was breathing hard, trying to control my anger. The point is that for 2 years, you've been living a double life where you got to be me whenever being you became inconvenient. Crystal started crying, but I felt no sympathy. David moved closer to me, not to her. What else? He asked his wife. What other ways have you used Margaret's information? That's everything, I promise. Your promises don't mean much right now, I said. Through her tears, Crystal looked at both of us. I know you hate me. I know I've ruined everything. But I need you to understand that I never meant... What you meant doesn't matter anymore, I interrupted. What matters is what you did. And what you did was steal my identity 10 times, forge my ID, open fraudulent credit accounts, and let me walk around for 2 years, not knowing that I could be arrested at any moment. I was going to tell you. When? David asked sharply. When were you going to tell us? I don't know. When I figured out how. That's not an answer, I said. That's just more of the same thinking that got us here. You were going to wait until you found a way to tell us that didn't make you look bad. The door opened, and the officer returned. Sorry to interrupt, but we've got another complication. My stomach dropped as the officer stepped back into the room. The fluorescent lights seemed to buzz louder in the sudden silence, and I could smell the stale coffee and disinfectant that permeated the station. What kind of complication? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. I felt the blood drain from my face. 3 months ago, I was in Chicago for work. I can prove that. Crystal, David said, his voice deadly quiet. Were you in Phoenix 3 months ago? I can explain. Were you in Phoenix? He repeated. She nodded miserably. It was when I told you I was visiting my cousin in Tucson, but I never went to court because I thought it would just go away. I laughed, but it came out harsh and bitter. You thought a criminal charge would just go away? Are you completely delusional? I panicked, okay? I didn't know what to do. You could have told us, David said. He was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles were white. You could have told us before it became a warrant. The officer cleared his throat. Unfortunately, this complicates the release process. Arizona will want to extradite, and since the warrant is under Margaret's name. But I can prove I wasn't there, I said again, hearing the desperation in my own voice. I have hotel receipts, work emails, meeting schedules. There's documentation. That's good, and ultimately that'll clear you. But the system doesn't work that fast. The warrant was issued, and now we have to follow protocol. I stared at Crystal, who was crying silently. Tears streamed down her face, but she seemed to be shrinking into herself, making herself as small as possible in the plastic chair. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw real fear in her eyes. Not fear of getting in trouble, but fear of what she'd done to me. How long? David asked the officer. Could be anywhere from a few days to a couple weeks, depending on how quickly we can get the documentation processed and coordinate between jurisdictions. A couple weeks, I repeated numbly. I could be stuck here for a couple weeks because of something she did in Arizona. I'm so sorry, Crystal whispered. Margaret, I'm so sorry. I looked at her, this woman who had been part of our family for 5 years, who had shared holiday dinners and birthday celebrations, who I had trusted completely. She looked so small and broken, but I couldn't find any forgiveness in my heart. Not yet. I know, she said. I know it doesn't. David was staring at the table, his jaw clenched. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed. Is there anything else? Any other cities? Any other charges? Any other times you used her name? No, I swear, that's everything. You've already lied to us about everything twice tonight, I pointed out. The officer stepped forward. I'm going to need to place you back in holding while we sort this out, he said to me. I'm sorry. I know this isn't your fault, but I have to follow procedure. Wait, David said, standing up quickly. There has to be something we can do. Margaret works for the city planning department. She has a security clearance. There are people who can vouch for her whereabouts 3 months ago. And we'll absolutely pursue all of that, the officer assured him. But right now, I have a warrant, and the person it's for is sitting in front of me. Margaret, she said suddenly, looking directly at me for the first time in an hour. I'll turn myself in. To Phoenix, I mean. I'll tell them it was me. After 3 months of letting them think it was me? I shook my head. That's just going to make everything more complicated. But it might help. Stop trying to fix this, I snapped. Every time you try to fix something, you make it worse. The officer was getting impatient. I really do need to process this warrant. If you want to make calls to gather documentation, you can do that from holding. I'll get Mom, he said quietly. She'll know what to do. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As the officer gestured toward the door, I took one last look at Crystal. I hope it was worth it, I said. I hope whatever you bought or did or got away with was worth destroying our family. She opened her mouth to respond, but I was already walking away. The sound of her renewed sobbing followed me down the hallway, but I didn't look back. As we approached the holding area, the officer's radio crackled to life. He paused to listen, then looked at me with a frown. My stomach dropped. More jurisdictions? How many more are there going to be? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The officer shrugged. Hard to say until we run a complete background check. Could be more. As they led me toward the holding cell, I could hear David's footsteps echoing behind us in the hallway. Margaret, I'm going to figure this out, he called after me. I promise. The cell was small and cold, with concrete walls painted an institutional green that had probably been cheerful once, but now just looked sickly under the harsh lighting. I sat on the narrow bench and tried to process what was happening to my life. I made her tell me everything, David said when the officer brought him to my cell. All of it this time. Crystal stood several feet back, staring at the floor. 6 cities total? She said so quietly I could barely hear her. Los Angeles, Phoenix, Sacramento, Denver, Portland, and Seattle. I felt the blood drain from my face. 6 cities? Jesus Christ, Crystal. What did you do in 6 different cities? Mostly shoplifting, she mumbled. Some drunk and disorderly. There was one bar fight in Portland. And the drug thing in Phoenix. A bar fight? David's voice cracked. You got into a bar fight using Margaret's name? I didn't plan any of this, Crystal said, finally looking up. It just kept happening, and each time I panicked, and I kept using the same name because I thought it would be less suspicious if I was consistent. Less suspicious? I gripped the bars of the cell. Crystal, I work for the city. Do you understand what this means for my job? For my security clearance? I could lose everything. I know, she whispered. I know, and I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix 6 arrest warrants, David said. His hands were shaking as he ran them through his hair. Sorry doesn't give Margaret her reputation back. The officer had been listening to our conversation from across the room. Now he approached, looking grim. I've got updates from the other jurisdictions. 2 of them have active warrants. 3 are showing as failure to appear in court, and 1 has an outstanding fine that's gone to collections. I closed my eyes and leaned my forehead against the cold metal bars. This just keeps getting worse. Margaret. Crystal's voice was stronger now, more determined. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to go to every single city and turn myself in. I'll tell them exactly what happened. And what happens when they ask why you used my name specifically? I opened my eyes to look at her. What's your explanation for that? Crystal's face crumpled again. Because yours was the first name I could think of when they asked. Because you're the most responsible person I know, and I thought if I borrowed that responsibility somehow, I could be better too. That doesn't even make sense, David said. I know it doesn't make sense, Crystal snapped, showing the first flash of anger I'd seen from her all night. I was scared and drunk and stupid, and I made a terrible decision. And then I kept making the same terrible decision because I didn't know how to stop. The officer's radio crackled again. He walked away to take the call, leaving the three of us alone in the stark holding area. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear phones ringing and voices talking, the normal sounds of a police station at night. "How long has this been going on?" I asked Crystal. "The drinking, the drugs, all of it." She wrapped her arms around herself again. "Since the divorce. Maybe before. I don't know anymore." David looked stricken. "Crystal, why didn't you tell me you were struggling this much? I'm your brother. I would have helped." "You were busy with your own life," she said defensively. "You and Margaret have everything figured out. Jobs, house, plans for the future. I didn't want to be the screwed-up sister who ruins everything." "So instead, you decided to be the screwed-up sister who ruins Margaret's life specifically?" "That's not what I meant to do," Crystal said, her voice breaking again. The officer returned, and his expression was even more serious than before. "I've got some news, and I'm not sure if it's good or bad. Portland just called back. Apparently, there's security camera footage from the bar fight incident. They want to take a look at it, see if they can identify the actual perpetrator." "That's good news, right?" David said quickly. "If they can see it wasn't Margaret, maybe," the officer said. "But it also means this case is going to get a lot more complicated before it gets simpler. And if your sister really did use false identification in multiple jurisdictions, we're looking at federal charges." "Federal charges for what?" I managed to ask. "Identity theft across state lines. It's a felony." "How long do federal cases take?" I heard myself ask, though my voice sounded strange and distant. "Depends on the complexity. Could be months before it even goes to trial," the officer said. "And that's assuming we can sort out the immediate charges here first." I looked at Crystal, who had gone completely white. She was staring at the floor, and I could see her hands trembling. Part of me wanted to feel satisfied that she was finally facing real consequences for what she'd done to me. But mostly, I just felt sick watching her fall apart. "What happens to Margaret in the meantime?" David asked. "She can't have this hanging over her head for months while you figure everything out." "We'll do what we can to expedite clearing her name on the local charges," the officer said. "But I won't lie to you. This is going to be a process. The federal investigation could complicate things." David ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd seen him make 1,000 times when he was stressed. "Crystal, do you understand what you've done? Not just to yourself, but to Margaret?" Crystal finally looked up, and her eyes were red and swollen. "I know," she whispered. "I know I've ruined everything." "You haven't ruined everything," I said, and I was surprised to hear the words come out of my mouth. Both David and Crystal stared at me. "But you've made a huge mess, and now we all have to figure out how to clean it up." "We?" Crystal asked, her voice barely audible. I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts. The practical part of my brain was already working through the implications. "I'm going to need a lawyer, probably a criminal defense attorney who handles federal cases, and you're definitely going to need one." "Margaret, you don't have to help her," David said quietly. "Not after what she's done." I looked at my husband, seeing the conflict written all over his face. He was torn between protecting me and helping his sister, and I realized this whole situation was probably hardest on him. Crystal was his family, but so was I, and we were on opposite sides of this disaster. The officer cleared his throat. "I need to process the current charges first. Ms. Chen, You're going to be released on your own recognizance tonight, but you'll need to appear in court next week, and I strongly suggest you get legal representation before then." Crystal nodded numbly. "What about Margaret?" "How much time?" I asked. "Could be weeks, maybe longer if the federal investigation complicates things." "Weeks?" I thought about my job, my reputation, the background checks that might come up in the future. Every time someone ran my name, would these arrests appear, even if the charges were eventually dropped? "This is going to show up on background checks, isn't it?" I asked. The officer's expression was sympathetic but honest. "Arrests usually do, yes, even when charges are dropped." I felt David's hand on my shoulder, and I realized I was starting to shake. My career, my future, everything I'd worked for could be damaged because Crystal couldn't remember her own name when she got arrested. "I'm sorry," Crystal said, and this time she was looking directly at me. "Margaret, I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I never meant for it to go this far." "But it did go this far," I said. "And now we all have to live with the consequences." The officer stepped away to take another call, and the three of us sat in the uncomfortable plastic chairs, surrounded by the institutional green walls and the smell of disinfectant. I kept thinking about how normal this morning had been. Coffee, shower, picking out clothes for work. Now I was planning for criminal defense attorneys and federal investigations. "What are you thinking?" David asked me quietly. "I'm thinking about all the things I should be angry about," I said. "My job, my reputation, the fact that I'm going to have to explain this to people, the money we're going to spend on lawyers." "The stress. You should be angry," Crystal said. I would be. I turned to look at her. She looked smaller somehow, hunched over in her chair with her mascara smeared and her confidence completely shattered. "I am angry," I told her. "But I'm also trying to figure out what comes next." "What do you mean?" "I mean, being angry isn't going to undo what you did. We need a plan." David squeezed my shoulder. "You don't have to fix this, Margaret." "Maybe not," I said. "But we're all in it now." The officer returned, looking even more serious than before. "I just got another call," he said, this time from Nevada. Crystal made a small, whimpering sound. "How many states are we talking about here?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "At least 4, possibly more. They're still checking." My stomach dropped. 4 states, possibly more. I watched Crystal sink deeper into her chair, her face going pale. "Nevada," she whispered. Oh God, that was the drunk and disorderly in Vegas. I thought that was just a citation. "Apparently not," the officer said, consulting his notes. "They upgraded it to a misdemeanor charge when you failed to appear for your court date." "Court date?" Crystal looked genuinely confused. "I never got anything about a court date." "Because they sent it to Margaret's address," David said, his voice flat. "The address you gave them when you used her information." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "What address did you give them?" Crystal couldn't meet my eyes. I didn't know your address by heart, so I just made one up. I figured it didn't matter since I was just trying to avoid getting in trouble with Mom." "You made up an address?" I repeated slowly. "So now there are court notices and legal documents floating around for crimes I didn't commit, going to addresses where I don't live." "Margaret," Crystal started, but I held up my hand. "No, just let me think for a minute." I pressed my palms against my temples, trying to process everything. The scope of this was getting bigger by the hour. "Officer, what happens when someone fails to appear for court using a false identity?" bench warrants are typically issued, he said. And if it crosses state lines, it can become a federal matter. Bench warrants, I said. So somewhere in the system, there are warrants out for my arrest. Potentially, yes. We're working to identify all the jurisdictions involved and get the records corrected, but it's a complex process. David leaned forward in his chair. How complex are we talking? Days? Weeks? Could be months, the officer admitted. Each state has different procedures, and some of these cases have been in the system for over a year. Over a year? I looked at Crystal, who was now crying quietly. How long has this been going on? I don't know, she said through her tears. The first time was maybe 2 years ago. It started small. Just traffic tickets. Traffic tickets, I said. So there could be suspended licenses in my name too. I never thought about that, Crystal said. You never thought about a lot of things, apparently. I turned back to the officer. Is there any way to put some kind of alert in the system? Something that says if Margaret shows up anywhere, she's not the person you're looking for? We can try, he said. But the system isn't really designed for this kind of mix-up. Most identity theft cases involve stolen documents or financial fraud. This is unusual. Unusual, that was one way to put it. I stood up and started pacing the small waiting area. Okay, so let me understand this. My name is attached to criminal charges in at least 4 states. There are bench warrants out for my arrest. Court documents are going to random addresses. And it could take months to fix. That's about the size of it, the officer confirmed. And in the meantime, I'm supposed to just live my life normally? Go to work? Travel? Knowing that any background check could show me as a wanted criminal? I'm afraid so. I stopped pacing and looked at Crystal. I need you to tell me everything, every single time you use my name, every state, every charge, all of it. I'm trying to remember, Crystal said. It's been so many times. So many times, I repeated. Crystal, this isn't some small mistake. You've been living a double life using my identity. But it did become this big, David said. And now we're all dealing with the consequences. The officer's radio crackled again, and he stepped away to answer it. I watched him talk in low, serious tones, occasionally glancing back at our little group. That doesn't sound good, David murmured. The officer returned, his expression grim. We've got another problem. My stomach dropped. Another problem? What kind of problem? The officer glanced at Crystal, then back at me. There's been some activity on your name in the system just in the past hour. Someone matching your description was picked up in Nevada. That's impossible, I said. I've been here all day. We know that, the officer said. But the system doesn't, and Nevada doesn't know about this situation yet. Crystal's face went white. Oh no, no. Crystal, David said sharply. What did you do? I gave someone my ID, she whispered. My fake ID, the one with Margaret's name on it. I loaned it to someone. You loaned it, I repeated slowly. You made a fake ID with my name on it, and then you gave it to someone else? She needed it for something, and I thought it would be okay for just one night. She who? David demanded. Just someone I know. She was supposed to give it back yesterday, but she hasn't answered my calls. I sat down hard in the plastic chair. So now there's someone else out there using my identity? Someone I don't even know? I'm sorry, Crystal said. I'm so sorry. I never thought this would happen. You never think, Crystal. The words came out louder than I intended, and several people in the waiting area turned to look. I lowered my voice, but couldn't hide the anger. You never think about consequences. You never think about how your actions affect other people. That's not fair, Crystal said. Fair? I stood up again. What's not fair is that I can't apply for jobs without worrying about background checks. What's not fair is that I'm afraid to travel because I might get arrested at an airport. What's not fair is that my credit could be ruined, my reputation destroyed, all because my sister can't face the consequences of her own actions. Crystal was crying harder now, but for the first time since this whole mess started, I didn't feel sorry for her. I felt angry. Furious, actually. Margaret, David said quietly. Take a breath. No, David. I'm tired of taking breaths. I'm tired of being understanding. I'm tired of making excuses for her. I turned to Crystal. Do you have any idea what you've done to my life? I was trying to protect you, Crystal said through her tears. Protect me? By destroying my identity? By making me a criminal in 4 states? By giving my name to strangers? I was trying to protect Mom from worrying about me. And what about me? What about my life? Did you ever think about that? The officer cleared his throat. We need to focus on the immediate problem. This person in Nevada, we need to contact them and get this straightened out before it gets worse. How much worse can it get? I asked. The charge in Nevada is more serious than the others, he said. It's a felony. The room went silent except for the sound of Crystal's crying. A felony. My name was now attached to a felony charge. What kind of felony? David asked. Drug possession with intent to distribute? I felt dizzy. I gripped the back of the chair to steady myself. So not only am I supposedly a repeat offender for petty crimes, now I'm a drug dealer too? We'll get it sorted out, the officer said, but he didn't sound as confident as he had earlier. I think that's everything, she said quietly. You think? You thought you'd told me everything an hour ago too. David stood up and put a hand on my shoulder. Let's focus on what we can control right now. What can we control, David? Someone I don't know is out there with my identity, apparently selling drugs. Crystal can't even tell us who this person is or how to reach them. I have her number, Crystal said. I just can't get through. Give me the number, the officer said. We'll track her down. As Crystal fumbled for her phone, I realized that this nightmare was far from over. In fact, it was getting worse by the hour. And somewhere out there, a complete stranger was living my life better than I was. Crystal fumbled with her phone, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it twice. I watched her struggle and felt a mix of frustration and pity that made my stomach churn. How had my own sister become this person I barely recognized? The number's disconnected, Crystal said, staring at her screen. It just goes to some automated message about the number being out of service. Of course it is, I said, sinking into the chair. Because nothing about this situation could possibly be straightforward. The officer made a note on his pad. We'll run the number through our system, see what we can find. In the meantime, we need to start the paperwork to clear your record. It's going to take time, though. Weeks, maybe months. Months. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine explaining to my boss why I couldn't travel for work anymore. Why every background check would come back flagged. How do you tell people that your life has been hijacked by someone you've never met? I can help with the legal stuff, David said. I know some people who specialize in identity theft cases. This isn't identity theft, I said. This is my sister systematically destroying my life one arrest at a time. I looked at Crystal, who had gone very quiet. You said you were trying to protect Mom. What did you tell her about where you've been all these years? Crystal wiped her nose with a tissue. I told her I was traveling for work, that I was doing consulting jobs that kept me busy. And she believed you? Why wouldn't she? Why? You travel for work all the time? There it was again, that casual way she talked about taking pieces of my life. So you've been living off my reputation with Mom too. What else, Crystal? What other parts of my life have you borrowed? David cleared his throat. Maybe we should focus on the immediate steps we need to take. No, David, I need to understand this. I leaned forward, studying Crystal's face. When did this start? The first time you used my name? What were you thinking? Crystal was quiet for so long, I thought she wasn't going to answer. Finally, she said, It was about 5 years ago. I got pulled over for speeding, and I panicked. I'd been drinking, and I knew if I got another DUI, I'd go to jail. So I gave them your name instead. And it worked. Yeah, it worked. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. And I told myself it was just that once, that I'd never do it again. But you did. I kept getting in trouble, and every time I thought about calling you or Mom for help, I just couldn't. You both had your lives so together, and I was such a mess. The officer stood up. I'm going to make some calls. Start the process of tracking down this Nevada situation. I'll be back in a few minutes. After he left, the three of us sat in uncomfortable silence. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall and the muffled sounds of the police station beyond the door. Normal people dealing with normal problems. Probably. I never meant for it to get this bad, Crystal said quietly. But it did get this bad, I said. And now someone else is out there, using my name for things I can't even imagine. We'll find her, David said. Will we? And what happens when we do? What do we say? Excuse me, could you please stop being me? I laughed, but it came out bitter and sharp. This is insane. This whole situation is completely insane. I know, Crystal said, and I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this, Crystal. Sorry doesn't make the felony charge go away. Sorry doesn't give me back my clean record or my peace of mind. Then what do you want from me? Crystal's voice cracked. I can't undo it. I can't go back and make different choices. I stared at her, this stranger who shared my face, my DNA, my childhood memories. I want to know who you gave my information to. I want to know how many people out there have my social security number, my birthday, my mother's maiden name. I want to know what other crimes I'm going to be blamed for. I don't know, Crystal whispered. That's not good enough. The door opened, and the officer came back in, his expression grim. We've got a bigger problem, he said, and my heart sank even further, which I hadn't thought was possible. What kind of bigger problem? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Officer Martinez sat down heavily. The Nevada case isn't just identity theft. The woman they arrested under your name is connected to a credit card fraud ring. They've been tracking purchases across multiple states, and your name is attached to about $15,000 in fraudulent charges. The room spun slightly. 15,000? The good news is that once we establish the identity mix-up, you won't be held responsible. The bad news is that your credit is probably destroyed, and this is going to take months to sort out. I put my head in my hands. My mortgage refinancing. The loan I applied for last week. Everything's going to be flagged. I'm so sorry, Crystal said again, but I barely heard her. David leaned forward. What's the process for clearing this up? We'll need to file reports in multiple jurisdictions. Nevada, obviously, but also here and anywhere else charges have appeared. We'll need documentation proving the identity theft, fingerprints, DNA if necessary. How long? I asked. Could be 6 months, could be longer. The silence that followed felt crushing. I could hear Crystal crying quietly, but I couldn't look at her. I couldn't even process what this meant for my life, my job, my future. "There's something else," Crystal said so quietly I almost missed it. Officer Martinez and David both looked at her. I kept staring at the table. "What?" David asked when I didn't respond. "I might have told someone else your information," Crystal said. "Not to use it, just—" "I was staying with this girl in Phoenix for a few weeks last year, and she saw some of your mail that I had. She asked questions." Now I did look up. "What kind of questions?" "What else did you tell her?" Crystal's face crumpled. "She kept asking about you, about whether you had money, what you did for work. I thought she was just making conversation." Officer Martinez was taking notes now. "Do you remember her name?" "Jessica something. I don't know her last name." "And you think she might be the one in Nevada?" "I don't know. Maybe. She talked about going to Vegas a lot." I stood up abruptly. "I need air." "Sarah, wait," David said, but I was already at the door. I walked out into the main area of the police station, past the desk sergeant and the waiting area filled with people dealing with their own crises. Outside, the afternoon sun felt too bright, the normal world too ordinary for what was happening to my life. David found me sitting on the steps a few minutes later. "This is never going to end," I said without looking at him. "Every time I think we've found the bottom of this mess, it gets deeper." He sat down next to me. "It will end. It might take time, but it will end." "That's not how identity theft works. There are systems in place." "Are there? Because those systems didn't stop any of this from happening in the first place." David was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Do you want me to drive you home? I can't just leave. Crystal's still in there, and we need to figure out what to do about Phoenix. Crystal will be fine. She's an adult, and she got herself into this mess." I looked at him. "That's my sister you're talking about." "Is she? Because an hour ago you said you didn't even know her anymore." He was right, and I hated that he was right. "She's still family." "Family doesn't destroy each other's lives. Family makes mistakes." I stood up. "I'm going back in." Crystal was still sitting in the conference room, tissues scattered around her on the table. Officer Martinez was gone. "Where's the officer?" I asked. "Making more calls about the Phoenix thing." Crystal looked up at me with swollen eyes. "I thought you left." "I thought about it." "Why does it matter? The police will find her." "Because," I said, sitting down next to David, "I need to know how many other Jessicas are out there. I need to know everyone you've talked to about me, everyone who's seen my mail, everyone who knows my information." Crystal wiped her nose. "I don't remember everyone." "Try." "Sarah," David said quietly, "maybe we should focus on the immediate issues." Crystal stared at the table. "There was a guy in Denver, Marcus. He helped me get a fake ID once, and I had to give him real information to make it look legitimate." My stomach dropped. "What kind of fake ID?" "Just a driver's license. I needed it for work." "What work requires a fake ID, Crystal?" She was quiet. "What work?" "Dancing, at clubs. They wanted someone who looked young." I closed my eyes. "So, somewhere out there is a fake ID with my name on it and your picture." "Probably not anymore. That was 3 years ago." "Probably?" "We've contacted Phoenix PD," he said. "They're going to look into this Jessica connection. In the meantime, we need to start the paperwork to document everything Crystal has told us." "How much paperwork?" David asked. "A lot. This is going to be a long process. I'll do whatever you need me to do, she said. Will you? Because this isn't going to be easy. There are going to be more police stations, more questions, probably court dates. Are you going to stick around for all of that? Or are you going to disappear again? I'll stick around. Promise me. I promise. David leaned back in his chair. Okay, then let's figure out how to fix this. Ring the bell. The next episode is close.